Well, look, on the one hand, this is a total disruption. None of us have lived through anything that looks remotely like this. So it's a complete change. In some ways, it's an impending catastrophe, and we have to be aware of that.
So we've been spending the last 3 months interviewing startups from London and asking them about how they're adapting to this new COVID pandemic situation. And we've gathered their learnings into a documentary. We hope you enjoyed that. It basically has 5 chapters. The first chapter is about fragility versus agility. Yes, startups are very agile, but at the same time, they are very fragile due to lack of resources. The second idea, or even the narrative embraced by the whole ecosystem, is halve the burn rate, double the runway. The third chapter is about bubbles of opportunity. Some startups will discover those bubbles of opportunity and rise to the top, whereas others will not, and unfortunately drown. The fourth idea is that you need to pivot for the new needs, and this is only possible by a new type of collaboration, not just the collaboration between individuals, but collaboration between startups and other companies. And the fifth chapter is about new rules in monetization, funding, office space, how teams collaborate, how they develop products. Very exciting stuff. We hope you enjoy them. See you later.
But at the same, what's actually happened is that it's taken a number of trends that were developing inside our business and accelerated them dramatically. We had quite a lot of people who would spend some of their week working from home. Our headquarters in Waterloo, and every day people would come into Waterloo Station from really quite far away with very long commutes. So it was quite normal for people to spend maybe a day or maybe even sometimes 2 days working from home. And we have people in Singapore, we have people in the United States. So we were very familiar with using video conferencing some of the time. Well, that process has been driven hard to its logical conclusion. Now, everybody is working the way that some of us have been working in the past.
I think a lot of the, say, big internet companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Google, they were already really set up for flexible teams, and they gave their employees, as far as I know, the opportunity to already work remote and things like that. So I think for them it was a not too complex transition, but of course there's a lot more traditional industries who suddenly have to change their way of work. And I can imagine that for a lot of companies, this has proved a challenge. And also maybe perhaps if the company has been less digital in terms of communication tools and communication channels, because communication is the key thing, I think, to run a company successfully through crisis. And if you were used to always communicate in real life and suddenly you have to communicate everything digitally, but you don't have the right tools in place and formats in place to have all those conversations, then I think it will be a big challenge.
For a small team who are used to working remotely, I feel that a lot of larger companies have had to very quickly skill themselves up in working remotely and using remote work tools, whereas we are used to, one of our engineers works remotely quite a lot. So a lot of our daily stand-ups are done using Google Hangouts, and we use Slack religiously. And for us, it was a kind of a world that we were quite familiar with. The human interaction side, it makes you appreciate how important that actually is. And there are certainly decisions that have maybe taken slightly longer to make that we could have made a little quicker if you were actually sitting in the same room. But broadly, we've managed to keep pace. And actually, I think the fact that we've just launched our product in the midst of all of this is testament to the fact that the ship is relatively stable.
In a sense, being part of the tech community, we're quite fortunate in the wider context. Most of our team, they work from their MacBooks, right? And they can do that from the office, or they can do that, well, broadly speaking, from anywhere, as long as they have access to decent internet. And like a lot of tech companies, we also use platforms like Slack. It's kind of in our DNA to be able to work remotely. And in fact, earlier this year, we started thinking more deeply about what we actually call agile working. We thought actually calling it work from home had almost a bit of a stigma to it. The suggestion is almost that you're not working, that you're doing something else. And so we wanted to...
But it's a relaxed day at work type of a situation, almost, people understand it.
Well, this is it. So it's for the engineers, you see, and it means something different to everybody. But to the engineers, they think of it more like focus time. Time where they can really get into the more difficult challenges. So we as a company have thought about it as agile working rather than work from home, and we spent some time thinking about how to get it right. Now, up until sort of the end of February, as an organisation, we'd probably our maximum sort of number of people out of the office on any one working day would be maybe half. Okay, so maybe I think that's about typical, right? Now, of course, we're all out of the office, so I think in some ways, we were ready for this even before it happened. But in other ways, it's the complete decentralization of the company which has sort of raised new challenges. Everything that we have done remotely previously, we are now doing on a scale that we'd never experienced before.
It's working out how we can continue operating as closely together and as collaboratively together from home without having to micromanage or find other sort of more rudimentary ways of keeping tabs on what people are up to. So we're trying to create a very flexible, autonomous environment where we judge purely upon outputs, but still trying to keep some sort of fabric to make sure that our culture continues in a digital environment. So one of the things that we have always done is something called fika. Fika is Swedish, my mum's Swedish, and it kind of means coffee and cake. And every Friday we fika it up, and we get together and we talk about the week and sort of digest things that have happened, and we sort of start to mentally prepare ourselves for the weekend. Mm-hmm. But of course, that's a bit harder when we're working from home. So we're trying to find other ways to make things like fika more fun. So we do things like we'll dress up, we'll have like a fancy dress fika, which has been quite good. We do quizzes on how well do you know your colleagues. And then last week we did something which was really lovely, which was asking every person in the team for anonymized feedback on each other. So you should share lovely stories about how people see each other within the workplace. So there are things that we're doing to try and keep that culture going, even though everyone's working from home.
But yeah, for the team, we basically approach it. We broke it down in a couple focus points. The first one is tools, the second one is rhythm, and the third one is communication. So in terms of tools, we wanted to make sure, firstly, that everybody had time to adjust to working from home. Please work from home, see how it goes, and let us know how it goes. And then once they worked from home, we said, okay, are there any tools you need that we can order for you so you can be productive? Like anything, tell us what you need and we order it. So that was the first step. The second step was rhythm. So we do now every morning a global 15-minute check-in to kickstart the day. That's firstly to get into the work rhythm of starting the day. And secondly, it helps everybody align on their main priorities. So everyone shares how they're doing and what their main priority is. Mm-hmm. Then on Wednesdays, we have an informal tea time where whoever is free to join and keen to talk can join at 4:00. And then on Fridays, we do a happy hour to celebrate the week, catch up with each other informally. Mm-hmm. The morning, the every morning call, that's one the whole team joins in, and the other calls are for those who are free and keen to talk.
We've tried super hard to keep up, sort of camaraderie and the team feeling. For me, I've always thought that the hardest thing for working from home wouldn't be so much talking to our customers, but developing new products. And I've always been a big fan of everyone being in the team, in the office together. I'm not a big fan of remote working. I don't know if that will change now, but what I have found is that we can continue to talk to our customers, to talk to each other very efficiently. But when it comes to, sitting in a room with a whiteboard, making a new product, how will this user journey flow work? And, will people click here or that? That's much harder to do remotely. So we've been trying, firstly, we do a weekly Zoom team catch-up. We're now 55 people, so that's quite a big deal. Secondly, we have virtual running with Strava and so on, so they're competitions. We also have a best fridge of the week prize, so people send in a photo of their fridge. I think the first one, we have to guess who it is. We try to go, those look like, maybe they're French, maybe it's that guy, I don't know. Then we have a Zoom and lunch on Friday, so week 1, I couldn't get any eggs, but week 2, I had eggs, so I made pancakes live on air. The things one will do. So we're trying really hard to do the team piece, and the feedback from the team is, particularly the weekly catch-ups, where you can set Zoom to have a grid view, and everyone can see everyone else, and that I think is really nice.
But I think for a lot of companies and a lot of industries, there's still an atmosphere of profound uncertainty. It's very difficult to know how long this almost hibernation state is going to continue. I think like the macro message on startups is that they're designed to be anti-fragile. They're all constantly in a state of being pulled apart and put back together again. At least we try to be. We always try to be looking at what we've created for what it is, which is an imperfect response to some unmet need. And that general philosophy is actually like a pretty good one in uncertain times, because you don't look at what you've built, whether it's your product or your startup or even your team, and say it's fully formed and perfect. You look at it and think, okay, it's our current best guess, but can we make it better, right? And I suppose what we're doing is that, but at an accelerated rate, okay? I suppose the question's going to be, do you adapt? Do you completely change direction? Do you consolidate, or something else? And I think there's sometimes a temptation to try to become something very different, and that will absolutely work for some companies. But I suppose I really feel for the organizations that are perhaps unsure as to how long it's going to be before they can return to what they do.
So one of our customers is the NHS, for whom we are providing remote onboarding solutions for the NHS log-on app. That is fantastic. People feel that they are making a direct contribution towards the national response to the coronavirus, and that's a tremendous motivator. And it means that even though people are stuck at home, even though it's a new way of doing business, it's not business as usual. There is a tremendous sense of purpose in it, and actually that's what keeps people going. The intensity of work has dramatically increased. Something about working from home has made everybody work harder.
Being a manager when things are going well, it's great. Actually, you get to reward people, you get to sort of celebrate lots of successes. So
You're a good guy.
I think up until sort of the end of February, I was loving life as a manager, and now it's harder. And I think, it's a challenge to sort of balance that, especially with all the uncertainty, because I think so much of this is kind of outside of my control. And I mean, we've been very clear with our team from the start that we had sort of 2 priorities, which is number 1, we've got to preserve as much cash as possible, because when we come out the other side of this, we want as much of our sort of remaining investment to be there to sort of be able to rebuild and regrow. So everyone sort of needs to be in that mindset that every pound spent, unless it's sort of invested in that future growth, we really should try and save everything we're only spending money on the essentials. We really want to preserve the team structure for as long as we possibly can. So when this first hit, our response was, rather than sort of making any cuts, we said, let's drop the whole team down to 80% time. Ant and I cut our salaries 50% as well, just to make cuts. But we said, that would be equivalent to cutting a few team members, but if everyone can sort of share the sacrifice and we can make some savings that way, that's really great.
If you're a founder, and here's an interesting thing that everyone knows, but to put it in a couple of short sentences is quite interesting, which is if you have 1 month of runway left and you halve your burn rate, you've bought yourself an extra month. If you have 12 months of runway left and you halve your burn rate, you've bought yourself an extra 12 months. So if raising investment is going to be harder, you should be looking to reduce your burn rate as soon as possible if you don't have at least 12 months worth of runway left. Mm-hmm. And that means either you've got a big pot of money in the bank, which is great, or you have sufficient revenue so that your burn rate is modest, and without further investment for 12 months, you can still keep going.
Startups who are not wedded to a business model and are agile and able to adapt should be okay, as long as they can carry on finding their customers and their customers can continue to afford. I think focusing on extension of burn rate without having a solid new business proposition in mind is only going to defer problems rather than solve them. I don't think we're going to be returning to business as usual for obviously for a whole host of reasons anytime soon. But fundamentally, we are lucky within London and as startups to be able to react relatively quickly. And those that react best will be the ones that get the most out of this experience. Those that can't will probably struggle.
If you believe in the power of an idea, then stick with it. If you have to live on boiled newspaper and you have to take massive salary cuts and slice off absolutely everything that you don't need to survive in order for that idea to survive, then do it. Because better days will come, and your idea, your passion deserves to live deserves to survive the journey to those sunny uplands. And as I say, if that means that you have to just slice all the cost out, take salary cuts, which is pretty painful, live on boiled newspaper, do it. Because a company and an idea that survives is fundamentally different from a good idea and a good company that doesn't survive.
If the companies are going to find it harder to raise, for some of them revenue is unchanged or even growing, but for some of them there's a real problem. Obviously, again, if you're a restaurant, there's no one in your restaurant right now. So I would say the following. One, how rapidly can those companies reinvent themselves into a different space? Number two, how can they cut costs? And that, for example, could be an excellent use of the furlough scheme, where when things come back to normal, they can resume. So it's a bit like going into hibernation rather than going out of business. And three, yes, if you hit the end of the runway, then the company's out of business, whether it's, literally bankrupt or merely essentially lays off people and cuts its burn rate to zero. But then the question is, does it ever pick up again? These I don't know. Clearly, there's a macroeconomic issue, but for a founder, you've got to solve your own problems before other people's problems.
Save every sort of pound that we absolutely don't have to spend and keep the team in place, because I think the struggle, and I think emotionally the struggle for me is that we've got an awesome team, and I don't think anyone deserves to lose their job on the basis of performance, because they all perform excellently and we worked really hard to recruit that team, and it's a team that has a really good sort of harmony about it. So as long as I can, I'm desperate to kind of keep that team structure in place so that we're all there to just kind of restart and bounce back stronger. But we just have to keep updating our plans on a sort of weekly basis at the moment. And every time there's news that helps us, that's great. We sort of bring it in. Every time there's forecasts, you just sort of have to take them all with a pinch of salt, but just you sort of have to ride the wave a little bit. And I think what I should say is the most important thing, and something I sort of try and keep front of mind, is just got to keep communicating with people, especially when everyone's cut off and sort of working from home. I think one of the best things I can do at least is sort of talk to everyone as often as possible. We have daily stand-up calls with all the sort of team members. Now that some of them are furloughed, that's sort of reduced to just the ones that are still working. But we'll still do a weekly call with everyone just to update them on, what are the changes, what's the news, what's the sort of policy situation, and what have we achieved in this time as well.
The changes you make are worth making fast, and they're worth making soon, and it's worth being decisive. One lens that someone I spoke to invited me to think through was, if you cut your costs by 50% when you have a month to go, that gives you 2 months. If you cut your costs by 50% when you have 12 months to go, that gives you 2 years. And although that's a stark question to ask of any company, it's absolutely worth asking.
A lot of companies which, will unfortunately fail. Launch 22 is definitely at risk of being one of those. We're a traditional bricks and mortar business at our core business model. Not saying that we can't kind of also adapt and change, but our revenues are taking a big hit.
What's actually happening is that we feel like we're walking along a very narrow ridge with very steep slopes on either side, and the wind blowing hard and changing all the time. Because on the one hand, iProov has long sales cycles. We're the leading provider to enterprises in the world, and those have long sales cycles. So you don't expect things to change suddenly. What we're doing, we authenticate remote users online, both for onboarding, for ID verification, and for remote access to services. That is something that this crisis is driving an immense amount of demand for. So in principle, this should, despite the catastrophe of it, represent a tremendous opportunity. As I said, I'm walking along this ridge. On the one side, there is the need to exploit. There's the risk of missing opportunities. Crises create opportunities, and we have to seize those opportunities, because as an entrepreneur, it's unforgivable if you don't. But on the other hand, you can do that in such a way that you accidentally go bankrupt if the market turns out to be a bit tougher than you thought. So there's a really tough balance to be struck. And for anybody who's not caught in that terrible downdraft, I think that is the challenge: how to mitigate the risks, the huge risks that are now appearing, whilst not missing out on any of the opportunities. It's really tricky.
I think Simon Sinek also had a very good points on this, being that in times of crises are actually kind of opportunities as well. And so there's plenty of interesting things that a lot of businesses are doing at the moment, not just kind of in the bigger scale, but also for kind of smaller sizes. Leon, for example, are a great example. They have completely transformed the way that their business is operating at the moment, from being a restaurant kind of takeout place where you go in and you order a meal and you'd sit in and eat it. They've now transformed into kind of quick, fast takeout operations. So they've managed to keep their employees, and if anything, are doing a massive service to the rest of the country. So I'm sure you'll see lots more of that happening, which is really positive. But there's no sugarcoating the fact that a lot of businesses will fail. And it's very much down to the leaders of those organizations. If they just kind of sit back and kind of roll over and take it, then that what will be. But it's the kind of the businesses that actually sit up and look at the opportunities they have around them, and see how they can adapt their model, how they can pivot, which will see them kind of thrive in the future.
There's a lot of, it's interesting actually. I've sort of seen regular LinkedIn posts about the winners and losers in this respect, and it is fascinating who's doing well and who's sort of really struggling, because sometimes it's things you don't expect. I guess sometimes esports and games, that's interesting. I think fintechs will generally be okay, and I know London has a sort of fantastic, it's the hub of fintechs in many respects. I guess the challenge they'll have is the view that people take on their savings. But I mean, so many great companies came out of the 2008, 2009 crisis. And so there's always opportunity, I guess, again. And I know I keep saying this, but the big challenge with this particular thing is everyone feels like when the measures ease up, we don't know how quickly, but things will sort of return to a kind of pre-crisis state. The only question is the timing? How long will it be?
In a crisis, there are always pockets. There are always air bubbles of opportunity. When you think you're drowning, swim around and find those bubbles of opportunity that you can breathe, and that will keep you alive a little bit longer. We came about 2 weeks after we nearly went bankrupt. We signed a customer contract, which was unexpected. That cash flowed us for 9 months after that. Now, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there. People talk about pivoting your business, which is a nice piece of jargon. Mm-hmm. The answer is, if you can't sell what you're selling now, find something else you can do with it to sell what people need. A lot of people with businesses that are very exciting in good times just go out of business. It's a brutal grim reaper. But it also makes companies better because it makes them leaner, more focused. The guys who can't make it will learn and come back stronger in a few years' time, having been through this experience. The guys who do make it will come back as tougher, better businesses, more focused, more economically, more financially efficient. Mm-hmm. Better positioned to deal with the upswing when the upswing takes place.
A lot of companies at the same time, though, due to the nature of them being startups, kind of are adaptable, and I think you'll see lots of businesses changing, adapting, and creating kind of very innovative ways to survive and actually to thrive. We want to show that, one, we're trying new things, but also that, like, to show that the businesses that we work with, for example, that, like, you know, there doesn't matter what business you're doing, there's definitely other avenues you can explore. And yeah, you might need to pivot your model and perhaps take a hit on your revenues or lose an employee or two or whatever. But just we want to show that at least you should at least give it a go rather than just roll over and take it. And which I think completely goes against every kind of entrepreneurial kind of thought process. One of our founders, Vikesh of Honestly Good Smoothies, mm-hmm. He's actually seen an opportunity and is looking to take advantage of kind of the majority of people working from home, looking at kind of eating more healthily, and so he's kind of seeing an increase in his smoothie subscription boxes. So I think he's trying to capitalize on that kind of home living, healthy living setup there. So he hasn't necessarily pivoted his business so much, but he's kind of doubled down on what he's doing. There's also not Launch 22, but one of the kind of companies which we use as a third-party booking platform for our space is called Higher Space. So we kind of have our venues on there, and they have actually created a list of they've collated over all of the venues they've got on their sites, a list of all the spaces which are happy to volunteer their space up at this time for emergency hospitals or care centres or food points, and so they're actually pivoting in a kind of social way to capitalise on their asset, which is all of the spaces around London that are booked on there, and seeing if they can leverage those to support people in need at this time. And so I really like what they're doing there. Actually, that's really, really cool approach they're taking.
It's not news to say that an entrepreneur is optimistic, but I think some of the cause for optimism and just profound inspiration are around the way that actually I think startups are collaborating, but also countries are collaborating. And there's absolutely no sense of, us versus them. This is everybody together doing what they can to beat something that is a threat to us all. So we're having more international conversations with more healthcare services and systems. We're speaking with more health tech companies about how we can collaborate and share our expertise. And it's actually been a remarkable time for innovation in healthcare. We'd say, and this is no exaggeration, that there's been more innovation in healthcare in the last 2 weeks than has been in the last 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And I think that may even be minimizing the impact.
For us, we just wanted to ensure that we got the very best out of this experience. And for us, that means research and development. So we're spending a lot of time finessing our engine. I mean, the way that it works is we profile employees based on a sort of 150 different data inputs to put them into groups. So we wanted firstly to work out whether that mechanism was working, and then we look at the matching, and then we look at the mapping and the data analysis. So it's been a really great opportunity for research and development, but underlying it, there has to be an appreciation of who our next customer is going to be, and ensuring that the mechanism can be sold with a different sort of chassis, so it looks different, although the underlying mechanics are exactly the same. So we then can sell that to different businesses in a slightly different way to recognize the situation that we're in. So yeah, two things: research and development, but trying to adapt to continued sales, so ensure that pipeline stays busy.
As the inner circle is about bringing single people together in real life. I mean, you can endlessly date online, but eventually you have to meet in real life. So everything we've always been doing has been focused at getting people together in real life. So a lot of features in our app were designed to help people meet in real life. So unfortunately, we had to disable some of those features. We had to adjust a lot of our communication to encourage people to date online and to help them find ways to make most of online dating instead of meeting in real life. And then finally, basically all our marketing was focused on offline dating and bringing people together in real life. So the team had to raise and completely change our marketing from A to Z and deal with the new situation. And of course, the product team has been working hard to adjust, and the whole team has been really scrambling together to make sure that we provide our users the best possible experience to meet online. Of course, we also organize events globally, and we had to cancel, unfortunately, all our events. These events varied from after-work drinks to immersive theater to summer festivals. So we had to cancel that all. But luckily, our events team has come up with some fantastic online concepts. So we are looking to roll out some very exciting online dating events over the next week, which is a Netflix party. So we'll be inviting 50 members to join us for a movie, and basically they can all chat together and watch the movie. But of course, it's a movie that everybody knows. So in this case, our test is with Dirty Dancing. So it's more about the communication and the banter than about the movie itself. But I think the movie will provide a lot of good cues for good banter.
Netflix and chill online in a way.
Yeah, all the things we want to do online, they're focused about meeting people. So the activity that we do is the icebreaker to help people meet, whether that's one-on-one or in groups. It always has the focus of providing that informal natural conversation around, for instance, a game. So that can be the pub quiz, it can be board games. We've got lots of exciting ideas that the team is rolling out.
You know, clearly where I see founders reinvent what they do to take advantage of the times, I think that's super important. And sometimes it's done purely opportunistically, and sometimes there's a social conscience around it. You know, on Seedlegals offering furlough leave, furlough notices, it's completely free on the platform, but you know that's led to a huge amount more site traffic. So on the one hand, we've put capex and we've put work to provide something for people at no cost. Obviously, our hope is those companies will find Seedlegals, and when business picks up again, they'll want something from us and they'll see it's a great solution compared to others. So how might you as a founder look to see how people change their behaviors and what can we offer in this new way?
A lot of good things do come out of difficult circumstances, and you just look back at 08, 09 and all the sort of startups that have literally changed the world that came out of that period. Airbnb, Uber, all sort of stemmed from that time. And I mean, I hope a lot of startups are able to sort of make it through this period. I saw the French government introduced these quite impressive measures just focused on the startup sector alone. I personally, I'm biased, but I think startups they're a fantastic sort of engine of innovation. They're a great sector. They're worth protecting. I think we're lucky in the respect that we've got our government providing support enough already that we will probably survive this crisis. It's just a case of how well we survive it and how well we can rebuild. But if you're unlucky with timing, I dread to think if our sort of financing round had been coming up now, what position we'd be in. That must be horrifically stressful. And I think, I hope businesses like that are protected, because it's really just a case of luck at that point. But I think startups have so much to offer the economy, especially post a crisis like this, because they can move so quickly and they're so adaptable. So I really hope a lot of the good ones can make it through, and that a lot of new ones sort of come out of this as well.
On one hand, startups are uniquely equipped to rip themselves apart and reconfigure to respond to this new world, this new environment, and see the challenges. And on the other hand, the missions that we choose to solve, that's in all our DNA. And it then becomes a question of being true to yourself and true to the values of your organization in whatever new thing you rebuild yourself to become. So there's going to be a very interesting sort of cultural and philosophical tension between that. But I would be hugely optimistic for a startup versus an established organization that had its place in the world, because the world is a very different place.
There are parts of the economy that are in desperate trouble now, but there are parts of the economy that are not in desperate trouble. And if you can sell to those, then you can still keep going. And ask people that in your network that you know for, I don't think you want advice, for encouragement, for solace, to be told, just use your network to keep yourself sane and cheerful. That's what professional friends are for.
Again, as founders and startup teams, the opportunity then becomes, well, what lateral skills have you got? Because you mentioned Stasher, right? I'm like, okay, so I can totally see why this would be a big problem for those guys. But equally, what have they got that this new world needs? Whether it's an understanding of logistics, whether it's a network that they can leverage in some new way. We start to think about what our skills are, what our competencies are, and how they fit with this new world. I think way too dangerous and way too soon to be predicting if and when we'll get back to normal. But from a healthcare perspective, I think we will be more enlightened because of it.
Co-working is an interesting industry to look at right now, because a lot of companies will be taking big hits, and a lot of businesses will go out. A lot of co-working providers will go out of business. That's kind of, I think, completely
unavoidable to a certain extent.
Yeah, definitely unavoidable. But at the same time, I think what will happen in co-working is that you will get a huge amount of people working from home, practically everyone, which will change their kind of perspective on their kind of working life, and their kind of work-life balance, and going to the office, working from home, and it will show that they don't need to work from an office. But at the same time, when these bans are lifted, everybody will be desperate to get out of their homes. And so I think there'll also be a new kind of
workspace rush is there.
I think
co-working rush.
It's obviously all speculative, but I think there may be something like that, and there'll be kind of people not wanting to go back to their traditional office, and also big employers kind of realizing that they don't necessarily need to have their employees work from their office every day. There might be a surge in people looking at kind of co-working again. So I think there'll be a leveler in the market with this, and then I think there'll be a couple of providers which will kind of take, if they come through this, will actually do really well off the back of it and be a lot more resilient, which I think we haven't seen in co-working so much with the likes of WeWork and things like that.
I don't think that there's really ever been a better opportunity to to share our skills and share our resources. And I think that whereas some companies are going to be struggling, others will be struggling for different reasons. And I think this is a time to share, and it's a time to collaborate more than ever. I always get a bit disheartened, you talk about like the macro worldview, and I really hope that isn't the case. I really hope it is, and I really hope that we can in some way unite and be stronger, united for it. But certainly, and especially if we look at, even just the London ecosystem, we've got a lot of resource here. We've got a hell of a lot of brain power, and we have, probably the world's leading healthcare system, certainly in terms of sort of collective understanding and faith. I think that we have a unique position really in our role when it comes to responding to this and also to architecting the future from this. So yeah, I think if I had a thought, it would be, how can we all collaborate more? How can we all share more? And why, when the world is rebuilt, why not rebuild as much of it as we can from London?
Can't help but try and look at kind of the scenarios that we're kind of faced with, and then kind of try and think of the positives to take from that, or the silver linings. So an outcome of this virus is that a lot of people in business in general, in larger companies and corporates, will lose their jobs, or be put on gardening leave, or kind of be put on part-time work, and people will have a lot more free time as well as a result of that. I think business is slow if you're kind of not in a proactive kind of setup like some of the businesses we've just talked about. So people have more time on their hands, they've got more time to think, and I think there's going to be a slump. Not many funding rounds are going to be closed over the next 6 to 12 months. And we've seen that at launch. A bunch of the companies which are at our space are also looking to fundraise, and we're like midway through their raises. And as a result of this happening, they haven't been able to subsequently raise, and they've had to leave.
We just closed a funding round, so luckily that all went okay. But there is a model that exists, and sort of coming over to Europe as well, having stemmed from America, where you raise, you spend, you raise, you spend. So the margin for error or the war chest that you're able to then utilize going forward is obviously always very, very short. I think that model will inevitably change. I think a lot of VCs are currently supporting their existing portfolio businesses. They suddenly recognize that if we were to have another pandemic or another recession or something else that would cause the sales pipeline to stutter or stop, a lot of these businesses are really going to struggle. So perhaps that approach to fundraising, investing, bootstrapping, and growing will become more conservative going forwards. All businesses will just operate much leaner models.
So these are very difficult times for founders, and I think we're seeing it in two ways. Firstly, there's been a huge rush to close rounds before the end of the tax year. So investors are looking for their SEIS and EIS. The vast majority of early stage rounds in the UK are fueled by angel investors with SEIS and EIS. And now the end of tax year approaches, April the 5th, and everyone's looking to close their rounds right now. So in fact, we read about a downturn in fundraising, investors pulling out, but actually in the last few weeks there's been a record number of rounds closed. But what we're seeing is maybe 30% of investors, according to our data, are pulling out of rounds. So people are still closing rounds, but with fewer investors and with a smaller amount. So if your investor is a VC and they are taking 80% of the round and they pull out, or they want a lower valuation, then you've got nowhere to go. The round falls apart. But if you had angel investors and you had a dozen angel investors and a few pull out, they've got their own personal circumstances, whatever, then you still have the option of closing the round with a smaller amount. So reduction in size of rounds, but no reduction in frequency of rounds. And if people are using Seedlegals for their rounds, then they can turn it into a rolling close round to close whatever they can get now and top up later. So one of the important things is that you can top up later. So our advice is, close fast, close now, and then add more when you're able to. And with our rolling close provisions, that becomes super easy. The second thing we're seeing is that companies, of course, now some of them are pretty much unaffected. A med tech company wrote to us saying, we do detection of rare diseases, and guess what? Finding investors is not hard. But other ones, anyone location-based, is going to have a real trouble raising right now.
Everyone will have a long kind of consolidatory period, which I think will, when things start returning to normal, have a kind of catalytical? No. I'm not sure how to do the word.
Catalytical, is that a word? I don't know.
But like that kind of spring back with seeing a kind of a surge in kind of more ideas, I think, and more bootstrapped ideas, I think, as well.
I think that's spot on.
Because the funding will have dried up for the last, will dry up over the last 6 to 12 months, over the next 6 to 12 months, sorry, and it will eventually come back. But I think in that time, people will be forced to think more creatively about how they prove the concept of their business, and it's something which we've always promoted at Launch 22. Like a lot of people come to us kind of fixating on trying to raise funding, and then we kind of ask them first and foremost, like, what do you need that money for? Have you proven that there's a need in the market for what your product is? What are you selling? So I think we'll see some of those things happening, but yeah, so there'll be a lack of funding, which I think, and also a kind of people will have more time on their hands. So there'll be more bootstrapped ideas coming through, and hopefully that will kind of push things back up after 12 months or so.
Investment funds are going to be very, very scarce. Whatever the VCs say, I think investment funds are going to be very scarce until it's clear not just what the coronavirus is coming to an end, but what the world after coronavirus looks like. I mean, we're going into what is the weirdest, most peculiar economic environment that anybody's ever seen, and nobody knows what it's going to look like when they come out. And investors, I think, are going to be very cautious about that. At the same time, debt is becoming available, so now everyone's going to start getting much more experience than they ever did in the past with debt financing. But debt financing comes with covenants. No startup entrepreneurs, particularly younger ones, have never really experienced what it means to live within covenants. So it's going to change people's experience. It's going to whittle out a lot of businesses, and the people who come out the back end are going to be stronger, but they're going to be in a different environment. The real change in the startup environment, which I think is going to be potentially the redimensionment, if I can put it that way. Sorry, I spent so many years in Italy that occasionally I come up with words that aren't English.
It sounds better in Italian, I can imagine.
Yes, the downsizing of the office and service office market in London. The office and service office market in London has been a tremendous growth point. iProov's offices are in the largest WeWork building in the world, opposite the Waterloo Station, and they're lovely. But not just WeWork, lots of co-working spaces and so on. We're all learning that actually, and this means big companies as well, but actually we don't need all this commercial office space. That in fact, you know what? After we've been doing this for 3 months minimum, or potentially 6 months, that we're all going to be so used to it, we're going to have made it work.
It has really opened or forced everyone to look online and see how can we live our lives in the digital world, because we now have to stay at home. So let's make most of it.
If you've enjoyed this content, you know what to do. Like, share, comment down below, or subscribe to this channel. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. It also motivates us to create more content like this. Thank you for being a part of this community. I'll see you in the other videos.